That baby, how old is that baby there? 7 months. How many? 7 months. 7 months. See, in the first year of life, there are times in that kid's life when every second, a million connections are being made. I mean, every second, a million connections are being made at times in that kid's life. The human brain is the only one that continues to grow in the same rate outside the uterus as it did inside the womb. And we're born, human beings are born with very premature brains. We're premature, we're born, we're all premature when we're born. Doesn't matter when we're born. At 9 months, we're still premature compared to a horse. A horse can run on the first day of life, right? A human being can't manage that neurological control, the balance, the visual acuity, the muscle strength, the coordination for 2 years. So the horse is 2 years ahead of us in terms of brain development. So the horse developed in the mother's womb in advance, 2 years in advance of the human being. And why is that? It's because as human beings evolved, we began to have larger and larger heads. And we began to have larger and larger heads so that we could use the hands, so that they could tell the hand what to do. Because the hand is a very, I mean, compare the hand to the hoof of a horse. This is far more sophisticated. This is far more complex. The brain has to have a lot of circuits and connections and systems to make this work. I mean, if you try to build a computer to make the hoof work, and if you try to make a computer to make this thing work, imagine the circuitry has to be much more complex, much larger. And that's why you have these large brains. So large brains, and at the same time, we began to walk on 2 legs, so we can use the hands as hands. So walk on 2 legs, now the pelvis has to narrow. So now we have a narrow pelvis, large head. Narrow pelvis, large head, narrow pelvis. You can't wait any longer inside, otherwise you'd never get born. If that kid waited another couple of months, he'd be inside forever. You know, unless there was a cesarean section or something. Because the head is already the largest part of the body. So we have to be born prematurely to allow our brains to develop outside the uterus. And that means that most of our brain development occurs following birth and not before. And most of that in the first 3 years of life. By the end of the first 3 years of life, the human brain is 80% adult size, and the human body is only 19% adult size. It's totally disproportionate. And that means most of our brain development occurs in the first 3 years, under the impact of the environment. And the circuits in the brain that get the appropriate input, that get the right stimulation, they develop, and the ones that don't, they even die. And they certainly won't develop very well. And that's not so difficult to understand. If you took a plant, a seed, and you stuck it in the floor here, would you expect it to grow? Well, of course you wouldn't. Why? Because the conditions aren't here. There's no irrigation, there's no sunlight, there's no nutrition here. Why would it grow? It's the same with the human brain. It needs the right conditions. Now, what are the right conditions? Well, it depends on which circuit we're talking about. Now, the visual circuits that allow us to see, there's about 30 different circuits making up the visual system. That needs light. If this child was in dark for the first 5 years of his life, he'd be blind thereafter for the rest of his life. Because there's no light, the brain says, I don't need visual circuitry, there's no light here. I might as well put that energy into hearing or something else. So for the development of seeing, you need light waves. Now, the circuits of the opiate love chemistry, the dopamine incentive motivation system, the impulse regulation and the stress control system also needs the right environment. Just like the visual circuitry needs light. And what is the right condition for these important brain circuits? And this is where we're letting our kids down. I'm talking about as a whole society. The necessary condition for the development of these circuits is the presence of a non-stressed, emotionally available, constantly available parenting caregiver. Without the presence of a non-stressed, emotionally present, constantly available parenting caregiver, these circuits don't develop.